It started with the whispers, then came the scratches, the thrown toys, and the messages. Something in that house wanted to be known, and it certainly wasn't shy about how. In 2006, a family in South Shields, England, found themselves at the mercy of a presence that didn't just haunt, it taunted. Chairs moved on their own, dolls appeared in impossible places, and phones buzzed with threats from the unknown. This wasn't a ghost hiding in the shadows. It was watching, waiting, and playing a very cruel game. Was this truly a poltergeist, a psychological breakdown, or a darker intelligence that slipped through the cracks? This is Supernatural Signals, and today we're tuning in at the case of South Fields Poltergeist, where fear didn't knock, it let itself in. So let's talk about exactly what went down in the quiet little home in South Shields, England, back in 2005 and early 2006. You've got a couple, let's call them Mark and Mary Ann, we're using pseudonyms to protect their names, and their young son, just trying to live their normal, peaceful lives in a pretty unremarkable house. But that peace didn't last long. It started off the way these things usually do, small and subtle, the kind of stuff you almost gaslight yourself over. Toys moving on their own, doors creaking open with no breeze. You know, the usual, maybe the house is just settling kind of stuff. The classic denial stage. But then, the toys didn't just move. They started arranging themselves. Think stuffed animals sitting in a row, staring at the couple. Or a rocking horse balancing precariously on top of a door frame. And yes, before you ask, nobody admitted to moving it. And the kid was far too small to be pulling off Cirque du Soleil stunts with his playthings. And as you probably guessed it, yes, it gets worse. Soon, messages started appearing on their computer screen. Threatening ones. Things like, "You are dead," and "I'm going to kill you." All typed out like the poltergeist had decided to go digital. A modern haunting for a modern age. Very tech savvy of it. And then the violence started. One night, Mark woke up to a searing pain across his back. He'd been scratched. Deep red claw marks, as if something invisible had lashed out at him. And of course, no one else was in the room except for Mary Ann. And we're just going to go ahead and assume she doesn't secretly have Freddy Krueger hands. At one point, a heavy chest of drawers was reportedly thrown across the room, with no visible force behind it. Unless their kid suddenly bulked up, overnight, that kind of strength doesn't just come out of nowhere. But it wasn't just physical, it was psychological. Crude, creepy messages started showing up on a child's doodle board. And get this, they seemed to respond to questions asked by the investigators. As if whatever was in that house wasn't just haunting the space, it was interacting, actively. More on this later. Other toys were discovered repositioned in grotesque, macabre little scenes that look straight out of a twisted Toy Story. And in another particular chilling moment, two program makers from Orient Television who visited the home witnessed a toy parrot, yes, a toy, croaking out words it was never programmed to say. Just imagine a plastic parrot, eyes dead and blinking, suddenly muttering things it shouldn't know. If that doesn't make you question reality, I don't know what will. So, what exactly was happening in that house? Well, let's take a look at what the investigators say when they stepped in. So naturally, at this point, Mark and Mary Ann were completely freaked out, and rightfully so. So that's when they decided to reach out for help. Enter two paranormal investigators, Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson. Now, these guys weren't just ghost hunting hobbyists. They were serious researchers who'd seen a lot in their time. But even they weren't prepared for what this case would throw at them. From the moment they stepped into South Fields' home, strange things started happening. They witnessed objects moving on their own, no wires and no tricks, just good old-fashioned nightmare fuel. One of the most unnerving moments, a large, heavy dining chair that levitated and then threw itself across the room while everyone just stood there. Can you imagine the awkward silence that followed and the terror? But the entity wasn't shy. It wanted attention. And again, it was smart. It seemed to know things about the investigators that hadn't been spoken. At one point, Mike found himself the target of personal threat written out in one of the mysterious messages. It stated, "Mike, I'm going to hurt you." And it gets even stranger. The investigators watched as toys, again, these children toys, rearranged themselves into unsettling displays. One included a stuffed bunny holding a knife, popped up like it was waiting for someone to walk into its trap. Another had dolls positioned in ways that felt less like playtime and more like a twisted warning. It wasn't just a haunting, it was performative, dramatic, like the entity was trying to send a message and had a flair for the theatrical. And then there was the doodle board. Remember it? The one that started answering questions? Mike and Darren began experimenting, asking direct yes or no questions. And the board responded. The answers weren't always clear, and sometimes they were chillingly vague, but it was enough to leave even seasoned investigators unnerved. All the while, the toy parrot continued to sprout strange phrases it had never been programmed to say. It was like the house itself had become a puppet stage, and the spirit was the unseen puppeteer, controlling, taunting, and showing off its power in the most bizarre way possible. And this begs the question, was this thing just trying to scare the family? Or was it something deeper, something darker? So, this continues on with our questioning. How did it end? After months of escalating terror, flying furniture, threatening messages, and that unnerving toy parrot, the question arises, how did it all stop? Interestingly, the disturbances ceased as abruptly as they began. The activity dwindled over time and eventually stopped without any definitive intervention. The investigators, Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson, documented the events extensively, but did not perform any specific rituals or exorcism to end the haunting. The family continued to live in the house, and the phenomenon did not reoccur. If it was me, I'd be out of there, but I understand the housing market sucks. Now keep in mind, this sudden sensation is not uncommon in poltergeist cases. Many such incidents are known to be short-lived, often resolving on their own. Now, before I dive into my own theories and my own personal thoughts and close this out, let's go over some popular theories found on the internet. Theory 1. Poltergeist activity. Obviously, the most straightforward explanation is that this was a classic poltergeist case. Poltergeists are often associated with psychokinetic activity, typically centered around a specific individual, often an adolescent. However, in this case, the activity seemed to target the entire family, making it somewhat atypical. 2. Psychological factors. Some researchers suggest the poltergeist phenomenon may stem from repressed emotions or psychological stress within a household. However, the investigators in this case reportedly rejected this explanation, noting the physical nature of the disturbance and the lack of significant psychological issues within the family. 3. Hoax or misinterpretation. Skeptics might argue that these events were either fabricated or misinterpreted. However, the investigators claim to have witnessed many of the phenomenon firsthand, including objects moving without visible cause and messages appearing spontaneously. Now, keep in mind, there is no publicly released video footage of the South Fields Poltergeist events showing the phenomenon actually happening in real time. The investigators Mike Hallowell and Darren Ritson did take photographs of what they claim were the aftermath of the disturbances, such as toys arranged in eerie scenes and scratches, and items moved or stacked. However, none of this included verifiable video evidence of the objects moving or messages being written. And to me, in 2006, with all that activity going on, I feel like they should have been able to capture something on video. But that's just the skeptical side of me. But at the same time, spirits are smart, and maybe they knew the exact time to start activity without getting caught. I guess we'll never know, but I'll go into more of this as we go into my own personal theories and thoughts toward the ends of this video. Theory 4, a traditional ghost. Another possibility is that the South Fields entity wasn't a poltergeist at all, but rather a traditional ghost. Unlike poltergeists, which are often viewed as manifestations of chaotic energy or emotions, sometimes even unconsciously generated by the living, they're more as a supernatural entity. Ghosts are typically considered to be lingering spirits of the dead. So if that's the case, the spirit haunting this home might have had a more personal reason for the torment, perhaps tied to the land, the home, or even the family themselves. The intelligent responses, the use of toys, the eerie drawings, it all paints to a picture of something that not only wanted attention, but had a story to tell or wanting to give. Now that we have an idea of the common theories, let's dive into what I personally think about this case and my personal thoughts before we wrap it up. Now, for this one, personally, I find myself leaning toward a more paranormal explanation. I'm kind of torn between the ghost explanation as well as the poltergeist explanation. Yes, there's a lack of hard evidence, but the nature of this case is so strange and specific, it almost feels like something intelligent was involved. Like previously mentioned, some have speculated the entire thing was orchestrated by the investigators or the family for attention. But I find that hard to believe. Their reputations, their secrecy, it just doesn't quite fit. They may have embellished, sure, but it wasn't just one person seeing things. Multiple investigators reportedly experienced the same phenomenon. And let's not forget what we've said many times on this channel. Ghosts and poltergeists, in general, the universe are smart. If they can manipulate objects, make sounds, or even mimic technology, who's to say they wouldn't know exactly how to catch people off guard? What also makes me pause is that the family claimed to do nothing to stop it. If they were faking it, wouldn't they have ended things with a ritual or a final cleansing? Instead, it just stopped. No closure and no grand finale. That almost makes it feel more authentic. And if we look at it as a ghost angle, it makes me wonder, why the desperate need for attention? From my own experiences, ghosts aren't always malicious, but they are often lonely, angry, sad, or confused, sometimes all at once. Think about the online trolls. They nitpick, lash out, and stir chaos just to get a reaction. But behind all that, there's usually something missing from them. Something they want, and it's usually something we have, or at least understand. Spirits, especially ghosts, can do elaborate things for reasons that feel huge to them, even if they seem small to us. And yet, the fact that the activity suddenly stopped without any intervention does make it feel like a poltergeist, which, as we know, is often linked to emotional or psychological stress in the living. But that's where this case breaks the mold. None of the family members were reportedly under any distress. So, that brings me to my final possibility, one that honestly unsettles me and makes me nervous to say out loud. But what if it wasn't a ghost or a poltergeist, but something darker? The threats, the harm, the calculated nature of the disturbances. Could it have been something demonic? And worse, could it have just been playing possum, waiting for the right moment to return? Alrighty, so the South Fields case may have faded from headlines, but those who lived it never forgot. And whether it was a hoax, hysteria, or a true haunting, something strange lingered there, and maybe it still does. Anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my Instagram at supernatural_signals for behind the scenes content, updates, and more eerie finds. And if this story left you wondering what's real and what isn't, hit the like button, subscribe, and share the mystery. Until then, stay curious and stay tuned to the supernatural. Thanks for watching.